A mental illness is a disease like many other diseases. 2 out of every 5 people may experience a mental disorder in their lifetime. For 1 out of 17, the illness will be serious and disabling. Today, however, modern treatment, medicine and therapy can produce excellent outcomes, especially with early diagnosis and intervention. So why do so many people let fear, shame, and stigma prevent them from seeking the care that will help them most? Queens Public Television will explore these issues and more in this series, Understanding Mental Illness.
I was coming out of high school ready to go to one of the Ivy League schools, probably Brown University, probably Yale, and those are the type of schools that I applied to. And one morning I was sleeping and I had woken up and I just started hearing these voices. And they were telling me very negative things.
The very first symptom that I can tell you that I can definitely remember was I was looking towards out the window, and I walked back to my bed. I sat down, and I could hear everything that I had just left so loud, like if I was there. So I was concerned. I was like, this is not normal. You know, this is something that doesn't normally happen. But I was aware of that, but wasn't educated enough to know that I was sick at the time. And then progressively, thoughts came about of things that were really what I call abnormal thoughts, you know?
This imposing building in Queens, New York, once was home to thousands of mentally ill patients. Today, Creedmoor Psychiatric Center exemplifies the modern approach to mental health care, drastically reducing the number of residents. We'll explore how one program prepares Creedmoor patients to resume life in their communities.
For many years, psychiatric centers were looked at as the end point for people. Okay, and it's no longer like that. Oftentimes people would look at a hospital and say, someone is going to be there and they're going to be there for life, stay there forever, and often die there. And I think that what we've done in modern psychiatric care is that we've turned the ship around. No longer is the hospital the end point. Sometimes it's just a stop-off. And so what we have is a turning of the ship. And we don't look at the ship going towards the hospital, but we look at the ship coming out to the hospital. And the ship is looking at community care. And what we have now is everyone with their eyes on just making sure that someone, while they're in the hospital, are safe, treated, and ready to leave. And after that, all the eyes are on the community, getting people into the community, getting people to stabilize in the community, and get people to stay in the community. And that is the focus at this point in modern medicine.
But people need work skills to return to their communities. The Big Nosh program at Creedmoor provides valuable vocational training for the patients who staff and run it.
We started the Big Nosh way back in '98. And we had gotten a grant and we bought a hot dog cart and we had a table and we sold coffee and pastries. And we just grew and we kept on growing and we grew till now where we are downstairs. And I've had many patients come through this training program, and a lot of them have been successful going back into the community.
So in programs like the Big Nosh, we respect work. We respect the ability for people to go there, to get up, get dressed, be able to be social, be able to have a focus, be able to do something constructive, and the joy in which they experience after they finish in a day is written all over their faces. You can see it everywhere.
For Juan, the Big Nosh facility provided some important steps in his path toward recovery. His journey began with a sudden onset of disturbing symptoms.
You know, I went out to a club with my friend, and it was underage club. You know, there was no drinks there, but everybody had recreational drugs, and you know, that night I got pretty stoned in it, and I paid the price, because that was the night when the symptoms finally came about. The very first symptom that I can tell you that I can definitely remember was I was looking towards out the window, and I walked back to my bed. I sat down, and I could hear everything that I had just left so loud, like if I was there. So I was concerned. I was like, this is not normal. You know, this is something that doesn't normally happen. But I was aware of that, but wasn't educated enough to know that I was sick at the time. And then progressively, thoughts came about of things that were really what I call abnormal thoughts, you know?
Like Juan, Hawa was surprised by symptoms she could not explain.
I kind of thought it was weird. I just didn't know what to do. And I kind of paused for a second on my bed and tried to collect myself, like, what am I hearing? And then it got a little bit stronger. It got a little bit louder. And then I answered back. And as I answered back, my mother was in the other room. And as she was in her bedroom, she was wondering what was going on. And I started answering back, and then the voices got louder, and I answered back. And as that happened, that's when I knew something was wrong. And my mother now approached me. And as my mother approached me, her intervention, I became very upset. And as I became very upset, I now attacked her. And that's when she knew something was wrong. She dialed 911. It happened so fast. They had arrived, picked me up, carried me, and they said, okay, you know, everything's gonna be all right. Has this happened before? You know, the usual questions, has this happened before? You know, are you okay? And, you know, take all of the information down. No doctors can see me, so I had to wait till Monday. As it goes by, the doctor shows up on a Monday, and before you know it, they ask me the routine questions. You know, what did you hear? And I explained to them, I'm hearing words like, shut up, and you talk too much, and, you know, those negative things, and it gets louder.
Hawa and Juan eventually received diagnoses for their confusing symptoms.
Well, my diagnosis was first paranoid schizophrenic, but then it changed to schizoaffective disorder. It's basically a mental disorder that deals with some sense of paranoia. You might have issues where you might have certain delusions. You might have auditory hallucinations. And hallucinations are powerful because you might hear or see something that somebody else might not be detecting. So it's trivial. You know, you might think it's real, but somebody else might not think it's real. But the truth of the matter is, it's not if it's real or not, it's the danger behind how you react to it.
My parents were also sitting in the room with me. They're trying to explain to my parents. By the way, my dad and my mom were in tears because they're now getting news that they're unfamiliar with. What mental illness? What are you talking about? Then he calls a name and says schizophrenia.
Many victims of mental illness remain isolated at first. Hawa and Juan try to cope on their own.
I was wondering, what is this? Because it's strange. You don't even know. I'm thinking I'm talking to myself, but it was so out loud. You're trying to place, is it me talking out loud, but it's not you. And that's something that even through counseling, even through group therapy, they have booklets, and they have the therapist, the psychologist, the psychiatrist explaining to you, guys, I want you to be able to determine real and unreal. I'm in the mix of hearing shut up, and I'm hearing you talk too much, even though I'm talking right. You talk too much, and be quiet, and things like that. I'm questioning myself. Am I hearing this for real, or is this not real?
Sometimes within that, it becomes, at least in my illness, it became a paranoia, and I started becoming fearful because I had no control any longer of what I was feeling. I had light visual hallucinations, just colors and things like that. I've never seen something bold, that's actually there. I've never hallucinated that hard, but I've had, I've heard things, I've had conversations, within myself, trying to figure out why am I, what am I hearing and why am I having this conversation right now? And somebody else observing might think it's kind of strange. I wasn't afraid of it. I knew it was something that was happening to me. It was real, but I wasn't scared of it. I wanted to know how to stop it, and how did this happen? This strange dynamic that I had no control over thoughts in my brain anymore. Things weren't quiet anymore. I heard sound that was involuntary. So it was a feeling of, not having control. It's like you swallow something that bothers you in your throat. You know it's there, but you can't really touch it or feel it or take it out. It's in your throat, and it's moving around. So in my head, I have these ideas and these thoughts, and I cannot, and I know that there's something wrong with it, but I'm actually like at a level where I'm like, I can't take this away. I can't do anything about it. It's almost like a car driving very fast, and you're staring at all the people, and like the people just fly by. So you're thinking like a million different things as you're going in that car, that race car going extremely fast.
Denial fails to end their lonely struggle.
I wanted to just go to college and say, maybe if I go to college and I study and I read and I do what I'm supposed to do, Mommy, I'm sure everything will go away. The problem will be solved. And she said, it's not going to help. It's not going to be solved. And I was thinking, okay, I'll go for it. And that's where the relapses happen. And I know I'm seem like I'm jumping the gun by jumping and going, saying I went forward, and I started to go to school. And I said, no, I don't want to continue with treatment, and I don't want to continue with medication. I'm saying, oh, I can do this. I'm now in college. I'm heading for BMCC. I attempted the Ivy Leagues, and it was like I couldn't handle that because the mental illness is strong. And my parents, especially Dad, who's the breadwinner of the family, like I said, he's the teacher. And it's, no, Howard, you can't take on that type of, genre. Why don't you do community college? And I don't want to do community college. He's saying your standards are too high. Do community college. So he fought with me, and Daddy wins. And so I wind up in BMCC, and I'm in BMCC, and I'm fighting with the amount of load. I took on a full term load, and I'm also now fighting a mental illness. And as I'm fighting the mental illness, I'm on this medication, and then everything seems to be going right. And I said, I can do this. I'm okay. And then I stopped the medication. And as I stopped the medication, it didn't even take about 2 months. And then I started hearing the voices all over again.
As this illness started progressing and started, actually not progressing, but flourishing and starting to surface, and everybody's starting to see that there's something wrong, me and my dad weren't getting along either. So I went back to Pennsylvania. This only lasted a day. I went back to Pennsylvania the next day, and I stayed there, took a shower, got dressed, and my sister had to call for help. Because as I sat in the kitchen table, she asked me a question, and I became very angry. And I basically pounded the table, but with a force. And I'm a fairly big guy, so she was very scared. My sister's only 4'11". I'm about 6'1", 6'2". And she was like, "This, I can't take this anymore." And her friends were in the house with her, and they said, "No, leave it alone, leave it alone." But she felt there was something wrong. So the police was downstairs, and I actually fled the house. I panicked and fled the house, and they actually caught up to me, and that was the first sign. They put me in a normal hospital setting, and I was in the emergency room, and I ended up being on the ward for a little while, and it took a couple days, and I actually convinced them to let me go, and they let me go. I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't want to admit to myself that there was something wrong. I thought I could solve the problem on my own, or I could think it out, But it wasn't about that anymore. I had no control over that anymore. I needed professional help. I needed real doctors, and I think it could have been a mistake. It could have saved me a lot of trouble, if I would have just stayed in there and gotten the help and was educated about the illness, and I could have been, doing a whole lot more than I was doing at the time, that this was happening.
It took about 3 or 4 times for these episodes to happen where I attempted to go to college. As I'm attempting to go to college, I would start college, things would go good, I would stop taking medication, I would fall back, drop out of college, and stop taking my medication and go.
Frequently, the turning point arrives with recognition of the illness.
It took me to accept that I have a problem. And I believe it was in my mid-20s for me to say, I can't do this anymore. And it would have to take you constantly looking at other people succeed and look at yourself and say, how long are you going to keep falling backwards and never move forward?
If there's fire over there, you're not going to go to fire. That's crazy. But you can learn how to be a firefighter, to stop those fires, Where you see something that's dangerous or that can hurt you, find out, be informed about it, this could hurt you, But at the same time, you can fight it and beat it. You can actually beat it,
Medication. It's like I said, it's tough. It's a battle. It's needed, but it's just frustrating. It's just very difficult, but it's needed. I need it.
So what happened, one night I go out and I got into some trouble, and I basically, I got into a fight. And within that fight, I hurt somebody, and, it gave me legal problems. And within those legal problems, they found out, again, the whole mental illness situation happened, and they found out, so they put me through treatment. And, from there, as time progressed, it took me a very long time because, my illness was starting to become very severe. It was at a point where, it was just, forget about it. It was at a point where sometimes it was hard. My own family couldn't even talk to me, And finally I started getting treatment. I was in the hospital. The doctors basically, were very supportive. But to be honest with you, I had tried at least 8 different medications and none of them worked. But finally I decided to take injections, and that wasn't even helping, And then it got to the point where the injections started kicking in, and my attitude started changing, And basically that medication was helping, but then it got to the point where I was feeling sore on my leg. And I asked the doctor, he said, well, you're doing well. Why would you want to switch the medicine now? I said, doctor, I really need, so we finally agreed, and I took the oral medication. I've been on it ever since. So that basically is how that point in time, turned around, and it was a very serious situation, but it started turning into for the good.
Stable now, while at Creedmoor, Juan seeks to build his work skills.
I knew somebody that was working at the Big Nosh at the time, and I asked them if I could see Joe, and Joe said it was okay. So once I met Joe, and I went through the requirements to get the job, we became more friendly, and we got to get to know each other better, you know, and we have a pretty good, you know, worker relationship.
Juan came to me, he had the level, he started working for me, but he didn't, he was with me like a year and a half before he got into a little problem that he had to be held back from the big Nash. And then he came back to work for me after a year.
I started feeling better on meds, so I felt there was a point in time now that I felt better. And once I started feeling better, and it's almost like you break your leg and you know, and you're starting to feel like you're gonna run again, and you're gonna ride your bike and things like that. So I started feeling it slowly, gradually, but you know, I needed to progress. So I started learning different skills in the institutions that were provided for me.
And he's the gentleman that wanted to do clerical work. So, and that's where he went to do clerical work.
I took some clerical training, and at Russ Institute, NYU Langone Medical Center, I took Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint computer course. And from there, I had to do an internship, and I had to actually go through the process just like I was getting a job, you know? So I had to go through interviews and things just to get the internship. So as I went through the internship, you know, I learned another phase of you know, what I was trying to accomplish at Rusk. So now I'm at the Barlow Center after the interview, and I finally, you know, obviously I get the position. I do verifications and things like that.
His future, it looks good. He wants to be at Rusk. He wants to be in clerical. He wants to work in an office, and he's going to do it. He makes up his mind to do something, he'll do it. So I have all confidence in him that he'll get far.
What I could definitely tell you about mental illness is it could happen to anybody. Truthfully, it could happen to anybody. There's no control over mental illness. It doesn't necessarily, you don't have to be born with it. Some people are, but you don't have to necessarily be born with it. You know, you could be somewhere in the wrong place and you do something you're not supposed to do, and it might traumatically involve you in an experience that, you know, might cause an illness. You know, it's a very, very sensitive issue, and it's reflecting a lot in the public now. It's a lot in the news now. It's more frequent now, and people don't understand. What I suggest is people get educated about it.
You can still be out there in the world doing something. You don't have to necessarily say, you know what, because I have a mental illness, therefore I don't have to do anything. No, you can still do something. You can still be a part of something. You can still be out there showing your skills. And that's what Big Nosh has done. It opened up the door and let me in and showed me how to come right in and be a part of. There is a community out there, and it's opening the door and saying, welcome. There is someone that wants to also welcome you and say, we're here for you. Be a part of. And I thank them for that.
And if you do reach a point where you become mentally ill, you know, definitely get treatment, definitely find support systems, get medication, and stay on top of your illness and try to, you know, perfect your game. Because once that happens, it's a totally different ball game, you know? So you definitely have to be on top of things when it comes to serious matters like your life.
You can still have this, you know, mental illness, and even though I'm mentioning mental illness, it is a mental illness, but it's normal. You're still a person. And, you know, I'm Hawa. And Hawa's normal. And I'm me. How's Hawa gonna do in the future? Hawa is gonna keep taking care of herself. Hawa's gonna continue keeping her eyes on the prize. Hawa's going to make sure that she lets people know that this is not the end of the world. I don't want to get that this can happen to anybody, but it's not the end of the world, and it's not contagious. Feel like I'm on Oprah.
When Big Nash first started, the families stated that these clients were not going to be able to do this type of work. They didn't have the ADL skills for this, and yet they've proven all the families wrong. They have the skills for it. They know what to do. And I'm really proud of them.
In our next program, we'll follow several patients who struggled with a long history of mental illness. Join us for Journeys on Queens Public Television.